Welcome home. We are WNST. Tassel, Baltimore. Baltimore positive. It is a beautiful week around here, even though we're not playing any baseball and we're watching everyone else play baseball. Washington at Baltimore in football. That's kind of a rare thing around here. I remember my dad dragging me out Monday Night Football to see a beaten up Burt Jones take on young Joe Theismann and the Washington Redskins. But that was a long, long time ago. It's going to be Jaden Daniels and Lamar Jackson this week. This guy has covered many of the Baltimore-Washington wars. As a matter of fact, he was covering the Baltimore Orioles last week from the press box. He's a longtime columnist at the Washington Times, but was a longtime scribe and colleague of mine at the Baltimore Sun. There's a lot of that going around here this month. Thom Loverro joins us, our defending champion. You can also hear his podcast. He talks baseball and football and all sorts of sports things down in D.C. We welcome him back onto the program here to preview Washington at Baltimore. Things have changed in Washington, huh? Ownership, uniforms, names, all of that. They really have a quarterback, and they have the better record coming in this week. You wouldn't have been able to tell me that back in April, Thom.
I'm telling you, there's no way I would have taken up that idea. I mean, I'm blown away, and it all has to do with the quarterback. It's all because of Jaden Daniels. He is he lifts all. He's the tide that lifts all boats. He makes everyone around him better. He makes he gives the team so much confidence. It's funny. Ernie Accorsi, the former Baltimore GM, used to tell me that for a quarterback, you want the kind of quarterback that when he gets on the team bus to go to the game, all the players look at him and they think to themselves, we have a chance to win today because of him. That's how these guys feel about Jaden Daniels now already after 5 games. I've never seen a rookie quarterback play like this because there's never been a rookie quarterback who's played like this. I mean, his first 4 games, he was setting records for completion percentage that no one had ever seen before. And the most impressive thing, he is so cool under pressure. He is so unflappable and so even keeled that you just think that anything's possible.
Well, Thom, I say anything's possible with the baseball team here and the football team there, and we've witnessed this. I mean, you've been at it from the beginning, and I even talked this week about my former Redskin fan friend in 1996 sort of making fun of me for having Ravens notes before the Ravens were even named, when they were still sort of the Browns, and the notion that this franchise could ever, after the Colts and after we didn't have football here for 13 years, that it could supersede and become more than what the Washington football franchise was under Jack Kent Cooke and under Joe Gibbs and the 50,000 person waiting list. And, us up here seeing their tickets sell for $200 back in the 80s for regular season games in the paper and whatnot. The demand for what used to be the Redskins and what happened to that brand and how it comes back. I'm watching that in the same way that I watched, I don't know, the Chicago Blackhawks reemerge, these brands that are just poorly owned from top down. And you're one of the handful of people still left in the media that really holds a light up to ownership. It feels like a lot of journalism just gone the other way. We watch the team, whatever they say, we write. I don't know. You're not that guy. And certainly the Snyder era and the Angelos era, for what it did to both of the fan bases in regard to just chasing people away, now it has to be earned back. And I'll get to baseball in a minute because I know you were at the playoff games last week. But what has happened there for you? As you're not a fan. I mean, you're a ticket buyer of the Washington Commanders. You're a media member watching them. What has changed that gives you some confidence that you can say to me, hey, things have changed down here, not just the quarterback. It's they're good. This thing is on the road to getting fixed for Washington.
Well, I mean, the people in their ownership group, some of them I know, like Mark Ein and others. Josh Harris is the main owner. He's not beloved in Philadelphia, where he's the owner of the 76ers, but he's a DC guy, grew up in DC. And I think he understands how to run a sports franchise. You see, here in Washington, fans were not dealing with just the typical problems that come up with running a sports team. They were dealing with the off the field dysfunction that Dan Snyder brought to the entire organization, and it affected everything they did. Now, right now, I always say that right now, Washington fans just have to deal with football problems. You can run a football team really poorly, okay? But they had to deal with that plus all the off the field dysfunction. They had to deal with the idea that, it didn't matter like if Mike Shanahan came to coach here, as long as Dan Snyder was the owner, nobody was going to have success. There was a hopelessness that permeated, I called it the aura of self-destruction that hung over this franchise. And that's changed with new ownership. There's a real belief, and I think fairly so, that if they screw up, they'll screw up like a normal football team would, not like some outlandish, cartoonish, uh, soap opera like the Washington football team was for so many years. It's funny because the main argument that Baltimore and Washington sports fans used to have was who had the worst owner, Peter Angelos or Dan Snyder. But the other thing with what's going to be interesting to watch is, Josh Harris paid $6 billion for a football team for whose name the fans hate. I mean, that's a bad way to start. I mean, you pay $6 billion for the product and people hate the name of the product.
Yeah, I think I'm a smart guy, and if you would have given me $6 billion and had me buy the team, I'd be like, I don't even know where to begin to
Yes.
deodorize something that was so awful for so long. And I feel that way about the baseball team. We'll get to that and the empty seats in the outfield last week when you were here for that. But we're trying to figure that out on the baseball side to say, how do you rebuild it? And I would say, Thom, in the modern parlance, and maybe the Commanders aren't that because there's so much money that falls from the NFL tree that when you see empty seats, there's are poppy seeds in regard to revenue for the team. $50 ticket, $100 ticket here and there, even the hot dogs and the beer and the parking. It's nice to have that revenue. I don't feel like Mr. Harris needs that revenue in order to be able to afford Jaden Daniels. I do feel like on the baseball side, the thing is broken here in a way that fans are going to have to be ATMs in one way or another, whether it's buying the subscription for television, buying swag, buying tickets, being a part of it. The revenue creation for baseball is so much different than football. I think football could be fixed quicker in that way because the money falls off the tree. You can afford the players. Now it's just about like, how do we patch up the stadium? How do we give people value when they show up? And how do we make them care again? And the football, that's winning. If you win, and they're winning right now, I have a feeling you'll have sold out games at the end of the year if they're 10-2.
Oh yeah, I think if they're 10-2, you see, this is the test though with the football team here in Washington that the baseball team doesn't have the problem with. There's a real division about the name. Okay, a lot of fans hate the name Commanders, and part of it was because the old regime rolled it out like they were opening up a 7-Eleven. They did a terrible job unveiling the new name because they did a terrible job, with everything. So people hated the name Commanders right from the start. There's a
Because Dan
strong,
Snyder picked it, right? Literally, right?
well, yeah, supposedly.
Okay.
Uh,
Well, you say they hate it, but why do they? I mean, I don't. I think it's goofy too, but I hate it because Dan Snyder picked it. And I don't even like the franchise. You know what I mean? It just feels
I
like you're gonna go new, do something new.
again, they hate it in part because there was such a poor job of unveiling it. They also hate it in part because there's a big segment of the fan base that still holds on the Redskins. It's a strong faction of fans out there that may not ever come back because the team's not named Redskins anymore. And that'll be interesting to watch. If the team is successful throughout the rest of the year, what attendance is, if they do have sold out seats, because they were 3-1 going into Sunday's game. There was a lot of excitement, but the attendance was only 59,000. They had empty seats. It was not a sellout. Okay. And again, they've lost some fans through not just the name, but through 2 decades of dysfunction that aren't coming back. And I don't know how they capture that. With the
Well,
base,
I mean, we can break that into baseball in a minute, but I do want to talk about Jaden Daniels and like what that has meant over 5 weeks, man. We're talking about a really small sample size to build hope, but you saw Adley Rutschman come up here 2 years ago, and that sort of changed things for the Orioles, and obviously Lamar Jackson has changed things for the Ravens. for Jaden Daniels and for Dan Quinn and Thom, before I had you, and I've had Dave Preston on and some other DC folks here this week, I actually went and like looked on the Commanders website and thought, who are their coaches? Who are their front office people? What are they getting right? What are they getting wrong? I've known Dan Quinn a long time. And then I looked, he's like lots of former coaches, Anthony Lynn, different head coaches on that staff, Kingsbury running the offense. And I'm thinking they have a football operation there and there's nobody meddling anymore, right? So that's not happening anymore. So they can get down and play football. I think Dan Quinn's a hell of a coach. And it looks like this quarterback gives them an ability to do things that the Ravens have been able to do in regard to going on fourth down, in regard to RPO, and in regard to just an unflappable leader, he feels to me.
Yeah, I mean, Dan Quinn, from all counts, is a guy that most players like playing for. Uh, I didn't know how good of a head coach. He took the Atlanta Falcons to the Super Bowl, and then they lost that historic Super Bowl lead, at 26 or 24-point lead. But the last time we saw him in Dallas, his Cowboys defense gave up, as when he was the defensive coordinator, gave up like 40 points. So I wasn't completely sold on Dan Quinn. I am now, and the coaching staff. And the fact that it happened so quickly is really remarkable because I didn't think this team would do much this year because everything was new. More than half the players on the roster were new. The whole coaching staff was new. And it takes time for that to gel. You're throwing a bunch of people together to try to be successful. And most of the time, it takes a while for that to get on track, for all that to come together. This group came together very quickly. You got to give Quinn credit for that as the head coach, keeping them together with the right message. And you're right, they put together an impressive coaching staff that is very professional on the sidelines.
Thom Loverro is here. He is the longtime columnist at the Washington Times. Much like myself, he tends to hold ownership accountable and writes letters to people like Ted Leonsis in ways that I don't see. I want to get on to baseball with you because, well, the game will be played this week, but you were up here last week, and we're Facebook friends, and I see your work all the time, and I see your letters to various people, and I see your missives about all sorts of things. I didn't see the aftermath of your Baltimore coverage. I should say you're a longtime Baltimore Sun reporter. You were around here when Camden Yards was built and colleagues with Stedman and all the guys that, were a part of the Oriole tradition in the Cal Ripken Sr. and Oriole way. You're familiar with all that. What did you make of playoff baseball last week? Not just the fact that they got one hit and, like on the field. I'm trying to figure out how this franchise plays a playoff game again next year and doesn't have empty seats for $10.
Yeah. It was not a good look, particularly game two, where attendance was announced at 38,000 for game two. Again, you've got decades of disrepair. I've had this argument with a lot of people from Baltimore, and a lot of Orioles fans hold the Nationals' presence accountable for the Orioles' demise at the box office. That's way overinflated. The Orioles, and I wrote a column about this about a year ago because I talked to the people who were in the front office at the time, and this goes back to Larry Lucchino, the late, great Larry Lucchino. They inflated the number of fans percentage coming from Washington to Orioles games dramatically. They said it was 25%. It was less than 10%. Okay, the reality was. So the Washington impact to me was never as big as the presence of the Baltimore Ravens. The arrival of the Ravens coincided with the demise of the Orioles at the same time. They arrived here in 96. By 98, the Orioles were starting on a 14-year losing streak, while you had a football team that was going to the Super Bowl in 4 years after they got here. And you tell me if I'm wrong, because you know Baltimore as well as anybody. And I don't mean to take liberties by judging the fan base, but I know it fairly well too. I think that's a fan base that has to make a decision about investing their money in Ravens season tickets or Orioles tickets. I don't think it's a rich enough fan base that they can support both equally.
And
Uh,
that would be for the businesses as well. If
Yes.
you spend
Yes.
600 grand
Or
buying Orioles advertising and you're
yes.
you're not doing it with the Ravens, and if you find value in 80 dates and your company likes baseball and you have that vibe, the football thing is a different animal for entertainment, for pricing, for Sundays. There are only 8 of them, 10 of them, whatever it would be. Uh, I agree wholeheartedly with that. And I agree wholeheartedly with the fact that the finances of it got very out of whack where the Orioles were worthless. And this is where I would talk about last week. And if Mr. Rubenstein were here and I wrote him a 9,000 word missive last week about the trauma. I said the first thing I led with when his guy came up to me is I'm like, there's been a lot of trauma here. You are aware. And you are aware that I was traumatized. I've had my professional standing taken away for 20 years after he emptied the stadium and didn't pay his bill with me personally. And then people came to me like, I was the complaint department here for 20 years. People
Yeah.
called and I was the complaint department because they wouldn't take their own complaints. And during that period of time, and I talked to Luke about this last week. They had those Ollie's bargain nights where the tickets were $5, $3, really cheap, $6, whatever it was. It was 20 years ago. I was on the air. And on those nights when they couldn't draw anybody to come down for $5, I said to myself, it's no longer a price point thing. Because in the 90s, Tom, it was price point. Um, Camden Yards was sold out. You had to find a scalper to get a ticket for 7 or 8 years, from
Yes.
92 to 98, 99, Albert Bell even. If you
Yes.
wanted it, the Orioles were sold out at Moonlight Madness on December 21st. Picked clean. There were no tickets. There were 35,000 season tickets and 15,000 partials, and everybody needed to get in because they wanted to get their playoff tickets. They wanted to get their All-Star game tickets. Well, I don't, if the sell is I'm going to have playoff tickets and playoff tickets are $10. Tom, I went to dinner last Tuesday night after the first loss, and I was in Catonsville at Beaumont. And it was that I picked my wife up at the airport. She was flying back. We went over to Beaumont about 7:30, 8 o'clock. And as we sat at the bar, people kept coming in from the game. It was after they lost the first game. And everybody was pissed. And you know what they were pissed about? They paid 125 bucks on their season ticket form for a playoff ticket. And those tickets were being given away for 10 bucks and nobody sat in them later in the day. So that part where, people sitting on a plane are paying two different prices or sitting at the concert paying two different prices for Oriole fans, knowing that they paid 100 to go to a game and that the same ticket was $10 later because it went unsold. They feel like they bought a shitty stock, honestly. And I think the price point for all of this over all of these years, to your point, has been I've got $1. Am I giving it to Meriwether Post? Am I giving it to a concert? Am I giving it to charity? Am I giving it to Towson University or Loyola? Where am I going with my money? And the Orioles never had value. The hard part for me is those games last week had incredible value. They're playoff games. You're squeezing, you know, 12 years of nothingness and then last year and people didn't want to go for 10 bucks. And then the excuses are, well, it's in the middle of the day and the kids are in school and the weather wasn't tickets were 10 bucks for a playoff game. The brand is sick. The Orioles brand is sick, Tom. I believe that.
Well, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why those seats were empty. The years of decay and dysfunction certainly, I think, are the major contributor. But sports teams are facing some challenges these days because season ticket bases for everybody are down. People don't buy season tickets like they used to, and season tickets were the foundation for sports franchises. That's how they really did business. You have a young demographic now that decides 2 days or a day before the game whether they're going or not. Okay, so they're trying to get this young demographic, and the Ravens are too, with all kinds of promotions and stuff, trying to get these people into the stadium. You have a young demographic that I found, quite honestly, don't sit down and watch a full sporting event anymore. They watch highlights. They watch Red Zone. They watch clips. I don't know. I don't know too many young people that sit down and watch 3 hours of an NFL football game anymore, let alone a baseball game.
Or
I don't
care to
know.
understand it at the level that we did or the level we tried to
Right.
explain it over the course of our lifetime. It's not
Yeah.
that
So
important to them.
so I don't know how they deal with that challenge. So you have an industry that's dealing with spectator issues to begin with. And then, so you can't afford to be a bad organization and deal with that. And the Orioles were a bad organization for, let's face it, for 25 years with points of success in between. Look, I think David Rubenstein has put together a good group. I'm real curious as to what Cal Ripken's role is going to be moving forward with this group, if anything.
It looks figureheady to me. I haven't talked to Cal. I haven't run into him. I don't think Cal wants to go to work 60 hours a week running a baseball team. I mean,
No, I
if
don't
he
think he
did, he
does.
would. I mean, so other than that, he's in commercials and they put him behind home plate. And I haven't, I don't know of any decision making. Again, I'm still banned, Tom. I mean, last week they allowed Luke in, didn't allow me in. So we have new owners, and I'm still banned, and the Angelos is dead. So I am asking those questions like, are you people going to be on the up and up? I mean, like, when does this really change? And are you going to do what the old people did, which is see the empty seats and say, well, that's a pretty shade of forest green, and the kids were at school, and we're small market, and that's the part that's going to piss me off the most is the minute they say, well, because I can see Rubenstein's slipperiness. I've watched his act. Oh, we're a small market team. We are. That is Peter's legacy is turning the Baltimore Orioles into the Pittsburgh Pirates. That really is the legacy of this.
And he did it while he had a network that was printing money for him in the process.
Of course it was.
I mean, he did it with a network that was supposed to put him on par with the Orioles and the Yankees.
Well, the
I
poison
mean, with the
pill of
with
the
the with the
deal
Red
that he
Sox
had to
and the
give the
Yankees.
Nationals and the Orioles the same amount of money, that he was in control of the money. I mean, come on, you're putting the fox in front of the hen house there now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why the Nationals were tourniqueted. That's why the Orioles were tourniqueted financially. And at the end of the day, I know your feelings of John Angelos and Lou Angelos, and we read through the legal documents 2 summers ago, and I watched Kevin Brown get put in the kids' room last year, and I saw the governor of Maryland get lied to this time last year. So all of this stuff's really this isn't old Peter Angelos free the bird stuff. This is stuff that was going on in the last calendar year before he flipped the team. The Angelos boys they had a walk-off grand slam. They got $1.8 billion. They're gone, and now he paid $1.8 billion. You mentioned the $6 billion that Harris paid for the football team. That gets passed on to the consumer. There's no money train for baseball. It's a local regional operation. It's still making money off of its regional cable television, but not anymore. And I don't think they have a model right now, Tom. And that's where I am with Rubenstein. If I sat down, I'm like, what do you know about baseball's business model? Because whatever it used to be, it can't be again. And one of you is going to have to figure out a way. The hardest part for me with baseball is it doesn't come to people anymore. It's not on broadcast. It's not in front of you anymore. They don't buy billboards around town. Their players don't live here. There's no Brooks in the community or Boog or any of that anymore. And they go away on October the 2nd or 3rd last week. What are they going to do the next 6 months to make sure next year's not the same as last year? And that's where I want to see something different from them. And you talked about Larry Lucchino and Janet Marie and Marty Conway, all those people, Rick Vaughn, all those people back in the day. They went to work right away. There was Moonlight Madness. There were caravans in the offseason. There were signings. And the industry doesn't sign players anymore early because of money. So I don't know when they're going to make news or be relevant in the minds of other than the 30,000 people that love the Orioles.
Well, the Nationals have the same problem. They have an ownership that gets it that if it wasn't for general manager Mike Rizzo, the Washington Nationals would be a disaster. Would never have gone through the championship year that they had and the multiple playoff appearances they had. The Lerners, I've urged them multiple times publicly, to take advantage of when the football team was bad during the football season and put on events. Try to grab a little piece of the attention in November and December when people are pissed off about the football team and do something with the baseball team, any kind of promotional events. And then that never happened. Never happened. Like
Well, the Nationals have something the Orioles don't have. They had a World Series. You know what I mean? They didn't get the parade because of the plague and all that. But like they had a World Series and they should be crowing about that. I mean, as an Oriole fan, I still look and say they won before we did.
Well, and one thing I'll say is that they never got to reap the benefits of that World Series. They never got to cash in on the corporate sponsorship. They never got to cash in on the jump at the box office because the next year was COVID. The stadium was shut down. You know, there was no year-long celebration following the World Series
Well, they're
because
generational players running around playing for your Phillies, right? Like literally at this point.
yeah. Well, that's what happens. That I mean, yeah. There, I always say there's an expiration date on all these young players that come through here in Washington.
Well, we're going to find that out with Gunnar Henderson and Rutschman, and if he's any good, or even Holiday. I mean, Manny Machado running around for the Padres, and I'm thinking to myself, well, that was our guy, and we couldn't afford him, and that's the baseball thing. And I'm really worried in my market with that many empty seats and me doing what I'm doing and me not really seeing any change here. They're still treating me the same garbage that Angelos did. So on a personal level, they're not getting my money. They're not getting my mic. They're not getting me to open my mic and say things have changed because to my eyes, that things haven't changed. They might have gotten worse. There was nobody in the upper deck last week in the outfield. Like I was blown away. I'm pissed about it, Thom. As a citizen, I'm pissed. But they've earned it. I mean, I didn't go give them $10. My wife's like, well, why didn't you go down there? Tickets for $10, $12. I'm like, game was on TV. I don't owe them any. You know, they haven't done anything for me. What do I owe these people? What do I owe Mr. Rubenstein? He didn't throw me a hat. And I'm worried about what they're going to be doing and what Katie Griggs is going to find. She's going to find that this is a small market. She's going to find when she's going around looking for $800 million checks for sponsors, no such thing exists here for the Orioles.
Yeah, she may do that, and yeah, it's a massive task. Not nearly as massive, I think, as the one with the football team, because I mean, unlike the football team, you know, the Orioles were handed a $600 million check to fix up their stadium. The football team it plays in the worst football stadium, maybe the worst stadium period in America. Okay, and they just put 75 to $100 million into it to fix it up. Meanwhile, they're trying to get a new stadium, and they're running into roadblocks in DC. Virginia's out of it. It was never a serious contender, and I think they're going to wind up building the stadium right next to the old one in Landover. I think that's where the new stadium's going to be. But you know, but in the meantime, they're stuck in the worst stadium in the NFL. So you've got a product where people hate the name. You've got a stadium, the way you play, that's the worst in the league. Okay, those are two huge things to have to overcome. And I don't think they expected the football team to be this good this quick. So that was going to be three, but it looks like that may be taken care of for now.
Well, if they pack the place down, they don't have the sewage coming out anymore. Hopefully, the $75 million fix that. Thom Loverro is one of my all-time favorites. He is a columnist for the Washington Times. Also, you do your podcast. Give a little podcast there with Kevin Sheehan, right?
Yeah, I do the Kevin Sheehan Show podcast. It's 5 times a week. I'm on Tuesdays and Thursdays as co-host.
All right, curveballs, cigars. One day I'm going to come down to that back room with you. I walk by it when I go to the Warner Theater, and we're going to, like, I don't smoke cigars, but I'm going to watch you smoke one and watch everybody else smoke one. I'm going to have a proper martini. How about that?
Sounds good, buddy.
Sounds like a dirty martini in D.C. Dirty D.C. coming up here to do us dirty this week. Jalen Daniels, great quarterback. Lamar Jackson, great quarterback. It's the #1 game on TV this week. We're getting big-time announcers and all that stuff. And, Thom, I appreciate you. Washington Times, go find Thom Loverro out there. I am Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. Not often we get to talk about Washington at Baltimore, so we're doing it.